Hey everyone, Juan here. Welcome to SQL Lingua Franca, the podcast about analytics that reveals what the documentation does not cover.
SQL Lingua Franca. Mayo.
Today, we have Ksenia here in the studio. She's going to tell us much more about what it's like to work in a financially regulated industry. She's going to tell us about her transition from journalism to data. And we're also going to talk about Django Girls, which is an interesting initiative that she's very passionate about. Ksenia, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell me who you are as a person.
Sure. So my name is Ksenia Iakovleva.
Ksenia.
I come from Russia and I moved to the Netherlands around 6 years ago. And I started my professional journey as a journalist. And I studied as a journalist for bachelor's and I worked as a journalist for 5 years back in Russia. But then I decided to switch to another topic and I wanted to switch to IT, but I didn't know what exactly I wanted to try. And I was just searching for an interesting master's program abroad because I also wanted to try to live abroad. And in Russia, it's very common to have scholarships. So it's also like if you're a smart person, you're supposed to have a scholarship. So I was searching specifically for a scholarship and also interesting topic in IT. Also where they accept people with a journalistic background, which is extremely hard. So if you look at the master programs requirements, any IT master program, they would say background, bachelor in software development mandatory. But yeah, basically I found this one in Groningen. I'm trying to pronounce it in a Dutch way, in the Netherlands. And I applied for it and I got a scholarship there. And yeah, basically it was dream coming true to try out something with IT. And it was basically called Digital Humanities, which sounds very confusing. But practically it was taking people with humanities background and making them data analysts. So they were teaching us, yeah, it was very unusual, I would say. They were teaching us Python, SQL, database design, data analysis, data visualization, so everything about data. And yeah, basically I was not sure whether I like it or not, whether I will like it or not when I was about to come there. But then I really got engaged and I loved it a lot. And I decided I also loved Netherlands at the same time. So I got a new goal in my head to basically stay in the Netherlands and also get more experience in data analysis. So I managed, apart from the full-time master, I managed to get a scholarship with 24 hours a week, which was quite a lot. And at the same time, a part-time job at the university, also on the topic of data analysis. And the internship was also basically a data analyst in a small company in Groningen. And yeah, basically, after I finished my master's, I was searching for a full-time job in the area. And yeah, I have to say to the people who are trying to switch to data analytics from some other profession, it was super hard, so it wasn't easy. I got a lot of rejections and yeah, people probably didn't understand that I was a journalist before and why do I switch to this now. So yeah, it was a long journey, but at the end I actually got 2 job offers, so that was super nice. And yeah, I joined DEGIRO, which is many people in the Netherlands know it as a stockbroker. So it's online broker where you can buy stocks, bonds, any other type of financial products. And yeah, I joined it basically with an agreement that half time I will work as data analyst and half time I have to help the company to document its IT processes. So.
Oh, wow. That's like a perfect mix of everything you know.
Yeah, that's why I think it was that case when they actually saw my journalistic background as a benefit other than something strange. So.
That's true. I think most of the analysts in the world are people that transition from something else. I meet a lot of people that used to be in sales, that used to be in something else. But even though there are very few people that have been 100% analyst all of their career, it is still difficult during your first jobs to sell how did the whole transition happen. And no, trust me, like there are some transferable skills that are interesting. In your
Yeah.
case, yes, I can imagine journalists can write like really good documentation or can be really resourceful at finding the right tables type of things.
Yeah, yeah, and I think also in journalism, I learned that like every word that you publish, it needs to be checked and it needs to be true. Otherwise, you get all kinds of problems, lawsuits, and so on. So basically, in the company, when you write processes, it has to be exactly the same. So every process gets audited by regulators, and if they find some sentence that is not truth, then you might get a finding or some kind of a problem. So yeah, I think that was also a benefit that you have to really do fact checking.
That's funny because I learned all of that working with finance people. Truth is, my very first job was marketing, and quite often it's like, yeah, this number looks more or less correct. And sometimes I literally heard, yeah, 20% more or less, that should also be fine. But then when I had my first finance job, these people were freaking out about like a difference that was less than 1%.
Yeah, yeah, it
So
can be a lot of people can be very sensitive about it, and it's fair actually.
yeah, working in finance has its own, I don't know if you can say challenges, but it's more like the rules of the game are a bit different. And now that you say it, I can imagine why having a background in journalism can be actually very helpful.
Yeah, that's I mean, other people should say that, not me, but from my perspective, yes.
No, fair enough. I actually, one of the guests that I had in this podcast also used to work in a lab, and he's exceptional at writing notes. Like when you have to do an experiment, you have to write down a lot of the things that you try in a certain way and adhere to a process. And that also translates really well to IT. So I I think it's definitely interesting to find out like how all of these previous careers that you had affected somehow. Full disclosure, I don't think I say this often. I studied to be a psychologist before I did
Wow.
everything data.
But yeah, that's also, I think you also use a lot of statistics in psychology, right? To make some scientific conclusions about people's behavior, you need a lot of data as well, right?
Yeah, that's true. You do learn something about statistics, something about experimental design, but if I have to be very honest for my own transition, it was just I got tired of a field where every answer is it depends. I really needed in my life that 1 + 1 is always 2. So I went to something a bit more technical. And because I had a background in psychology, it was very easy to say, you can train me as a digital marketeer. And in digital marketing, I started getting involved with numbers. And I still remember the day that I secretly decided I'm going to become really good at Python, R, and databases until the point where I can fully quit marketing. And that was just literally it.
Nice.
I got full into the world of data, no marketing, no psychology, but it's still funny how these transitions go.
Yeah, it basically pushed you towards data or towards what you're actually interested in. That's
Yeah,
pretty cool.
yeah, but I've always been very drawn to IT. If anything, my father once told me I was always surprised that you didn't go for an engineering study, but now like you corrected it in time.
Nice.
Yeah. And you also mentioned like bringing up some of the stuff that we said before we started recording. You mentioned right now you're in a position of also being able to help people that are starting with that transition. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, so basically, how this whole story started, I was asked to temporarily switch from data analysis to process writing in the middle of my career in this company. So at the beginning, it was half time writing, half time data. Then for about 1 year, it was only data, which was awesome. And then I was asked to basically, sorry, but now we merged, 2 companies merged, and all the processes that I documented before were not relevant anymore because now we needed group-wide processes. So I was asked to basically create a small team that would document IT processes again for the group. And then we would potentially, or not potentially, actually it was the agreement, we would switch back to data analysis of these processes that we basically document and organize. And yeah, so basically we hired 2 people for my team to document things. So we were looking for the skills of not just writers, but people who can understand the process well, basically, and at the same time write. But we didn't look for writers because we knew it will switch at some point. But basically, they were not data analysts either. So they had different backgrounds. And yeah, so basically, I had to teach them from scratch. And since I was the person who originally created the reports, analyzed the data, so it was kind of established for most of the things that they had to do. Then I was teaching them and explaining them how everything was created and why. Because, in the real life business, in a real life company, there are many things that sound a bit unlogical or strange, but they are really needed, and that's like a workaround or something. So, you have to explain those things and teach people. And yeah, I would say some of the things that you have to look into when you switch to data analysis from another profession is to be really to check everything very carefully, because I noticed this excitement that a person creates some new graph, for example, and they combine different dimensions of data, and then suddenly it works out and there is a cool, beautiful graph. And then they get so happy and they're like, okay, it's done. And they are also happy to deliver it fast. So it's all perfect, but then they don't check exactly which data is behind the graph. So why is it, 20 in one place and 40 in another place, and also check it against the data source. If it looks the same way, they're basically the numbers. And very often there are mistakes there, so I had to actually check numbers a lot. Even though it looks nice and it looks professional and beautiful, but you have to understand what's behind the data, the visualization, basically, yeah.
Yeah, it's like one of my managers used to say, a junior can get the job done. A meteor probably knows the best way of doing it, but a senior understands the impact that your work has on the larger organization. What you're saying, like, why are you using this source, or did you test this, or did you make sure, or is this properly documented, or is somebody else maintaining it? What happens when you go on holidays?
Yeah,
all of that.
exactly. Yeah, and I think we also grew a lot in terms of the standards of our data analysis. So when I started alone building the reports for the first time, everyone was super excited. It was just like, we have reports, nothing else matters. We have some reports, it's so amazing. We had nothing before. But now, basically, we get more and more attention to it. We also know that it will be checked by the regulator, so it has to be correct. And we also kind of freeze each version of the report. So, for example, April report, I'm not able to change it anymore. It's kind of frozen. So you have to really make sure it's correct before you publish it. And we also got a lot of attention from internal audit departments now. So I literally had questions about why in the March report you had this number here, but in the April report this number looks different. So is there some error or something? So they really look into numbers very carefully as well. So when you know you have a lot of eyes on your work, then you basically also know you have to try harder, you have to check more. So
It's really interesting because I know some of the people listening to this, maybe you have never worked in a highly regulated industry like finance or healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
If you have, you get used to working with auditors, double checking numbers, people panicking because something is not aligning. But if you work all of your career in, I don't know, maybe like low stakes retail or I don't even know which industries, chances are the only thing regulating the quality of your work is yourself and maybe your team or your manager, but that's a completely different game.
I think the stakeholders as well actually is also a big part, especially like in our case, since we're analyzing performance of different teams, never people, but teams overall. Sometimes people get very emotional. So sometimes it's actually done by design like this. So something is read for some specific team, and they would just be very emotional about it. Would be like, "Your data is wrong. It can't be read. We did a good job," and so on. So, so we also get this kind of feedback from stakeholders, of course.
Oof, that is so hard. Like one time I had to build a dashboard to say like which person did the best at their job.
Oh,
It was like which person sold the most, and it looked like a racetrack, and everybody had like their face, and man, that it looked really nice, and I'm super proud of the work I did. But I also know it stirred up a lot of um, discussion internally. What do you do when people just come to you like they feel maybe hurt or they don't like what they see in their data because it talks about them? How do you react to that?
well, we are always trying to help. So the first approach is to try to understand what the person wants or what they are unhappy with, and then basically come up with some solutions. And yeah, very often it would be that we can't do anything. There is always some solution to basically change the way the data gets collected or how the process owner decides, because the data that we are analyzing is owned by someone, and there are also different stakeholders that are whose performance is shown in these reports, and they might be unhappy, but maybe the owner of the data wants it exactly this way. So there is also this dynamics that sometimes need to be discussed or solved or not solved. But yeah, what we also do, basically, apart from creating reports and analyzing data, we are also doing continual improvement. So we have to react on the data, on the reports. So if a report shows something negative, and it's normal because that's why we have reports to see if something goes wrong, basically we are trying to follow up on this. And so if this matches the person's concern or people's concern, then it's perfect. And then we just align and we move on and we fix the thing. Because we also create automations sometimes for these processes. And if an automation is broken, which also happens, of course, then we can just fix it, and then the data is correct and everyone is happy. But yeah, it's not always this way. But it's also another regulatory requirement that we don't just have to create the reports, but we also need to show, to prove that from month to month we're working on the issues. So if you have a report for every month and it looks red every month, great job that you did the report, but you have to do something to fix this redness, reduce it, or remove it completely. So that is also a big part, basically.
This might sound like a very boring question, but I think it's genuinely super interesting. For those people listening that don't know really well what it's like to work in this type of industry, can you tell us a little bit of the regulations that you have to comply?
Yeah, sure. We're talking about IT performance. And basically, we're using, there are different IT frameworks on how to do IT service management. So IT service management is usually how you change things in production on the IT side, how you solve issues or incidents, and how you solve big issues that are problems. So that is usually, it's called differently in different IT frameworks, but yeah, basically you have to choose as a company, you have to choose one framework and follow it and work accordingly. So we decided to choose ITIL, which is very famous IT framework. And the thing is that regulators, they basically like it, or they trust people companies that use a specific framework that they know. So they have more trust. It's also very, there is also a human part of it, of the audit. When they come, they can't check every single thing you do, of course. So there is always this, they are trying to check if you're in control of your IT or not as a company. And basically, this number one thing, are you using some framework? Yes, we are. And based on this framework, we selected specific processes that we will follow, and we make sure they will be running smoothly. And to make sure that a process runs smoothly, there is only one way to do data analysis. So basically, most important thing for a regulator is to check our reports to be able to understand if the process is running well or not. For this, we also have to define KPIs for each process. So this is kind of a commitment to what we want to achieve on a monthly or quarterly basis. So if we don't do this, then the regulator would have a problem because you committed to something and you don't do it. So that's why KPI definition is also very, let's say, sensitive. So you
It's
have
difficult.
to, yeah, because you really have to. As a data analyst, you also need to manage your stakeholders a lot because some of them are like, yeah, I want 20 KPIs. I want to see all of them in my report. But then how many of them are you sure you will be compliant with? Like 2 maybe. But then if you're not compliant with 80% of your KPIs, it's a disaster. So even though you want to see this in your report, it shouldn't be your KPI. So yeah, basically they're looking at which framework you're using, which reports are you making, and how complete they are. Because if you have like a report with one graph that shows super high level things that don't make much sense, of course they would not basically trust you and they would want to dive deeper. So yeah, basically that's the way they look at us. And as I said before, also you have to have this frozen version of everything so that you can't change it afterwards and make it nicer, update some numbers and so on. So you have to be really, you have
Consistent.
Consistent, exactly, yeah. So that's why also if you decide to completely change how you calculate something, you have to be very explicit about why you did it, how you did it, and so on. Because, yeah, they look at everything, basically.
I never thought of that, but going back on what you said, I really like that policy. If you decide that you want a KPI, you immediately become responsible of making sure this thing constantly goes up. That will change a lot because a lot of people just like give me every number that seems important and put it in the same view, and we're gonna stare at it every morning.
Yeah, that's not entirely true that they always wanted to grow. The thing is that you have to be at the threshold or higher. So because with some things it's really hard to grow actually. Well, it's of course everybody always wants to be at the 100%, but usually if you're always at the 100%, it means you don't have a good KPI or something is wrong with your data. So it's good to be at like. For example, if the KPI is at 80%, it's perfect to be at 90% or 95%. But if you're at the 100, it's already very suspicious, I would say.
You know, I was not expecting we were going to talk about this, but I really like the topic of KPIs. So maybe, do you have some ideas on how to make a good KPI?
Yeah, actually, the thing is that as a data analyst, also as a process writer, I had to talk to lots of process owners in IT, and basically my task was just go to this person and ask them what exactly their KPIs should be and come back. And that never works like this because they never know what they want. They never know what should be KPI. Some people, as I said, they're super enthusiastic. They want to have everything in their KPIs, and other people are exactly the opposite. I actually have such stakeholders right now. They are like really afraid to take to like sign under specific KPI, especially if a process is new and it's only started. But you have to have KPI if you have a process. So yeah, basically you have to really talk to them and to explain them what is the good approach. And we usually are suggesting to have of course, reasonable KPI. So there is no question that you have like 10 stages in the process and you have a KPI that analyzes the first stage and nothing else. That is already not a good sign. But basically some generic KPIs that would show that the process is running well. So, for example, for incident management process, which is very important in fintech, of course, because if something is wrong with the clients not being able to trade, you can get a fine, you can get all kinds of regulatory not nice things. The KPIs that are considered good are basically response time, so how fast the incident gets picked up by the IT, and the second is resolution time, which is basically everything that you need. like there are things in between that you want to look at to understand the process better. But in terms of the key performance indicators, like it's really all that you need. Like how fast is your incident getting solved, and how fast their reaction is. So
So I'm hearing a mix of things. Sometimes stakeholders want a lot of KPIs and they don't really know what exactly they want. But what I understand also now from what you said is sometimes the KPIs are super easy because they're determined by the situation, by the framework, by whatever it is.
yeah. There is no contradiction there actually, because it's the first one, so that the people want a lot of KPIs or no KPIs at all. It's more like psychological, and it depends a lot on the person. And the second thing, that you can have a couple of them and it's enough. It's basically a fact. So you have to be really careful, because you know it will be audited, and it's okay to breach them sometimes. It's perfectly fine. It's even good because it shows that your process is live, that you are not perfect and you know about it and you look at it. So it's really great, but you shouldn't breach it every month. That would be a disaster. So yeah, basically just have a couple of good KPIs. Of course, it depends on the process, but for my experience with IT processes, a couple, 3, 4 KPIs is enough. And it's not the whole report. Of course, there are more analytics there, but this is something that you commit to, basically, as a, not you, but the process owner commits to, basically.
I do have one hot take regarding KPIs, and that is you should always look at the way that your KPIs are correlated with each other. Just to give you a very practical example, if you sell something and your KPIs is maybe like revenue, number of customers, customer satisfaction, it should be very important that all of those three are correlated and they go up at the same time, or inversely correlated. Like when this one, like for example, when customer satisfaction and sales go up, it should never be at the expense of a number of complaints increasing. Because quite often, if you don't check the correlation, people are just gonna hack their way into like raising a number at the expense of all sorts of other things. Typical example was you can increase the revenue quite a lot, but making your employees miserable. But that's also something that nobody wants.
Yeah, I really love this thought and this idea that, yeah, that's also kind of a danger of being in regulatory requirements and working on KPIs, that you just get obsessed with the numbers and then you forget about the other things, like you said, client happiness, or, for example, employee happiness, which is also super important. So you can have like 100% resolution time of all the incidents, but maybe your incident management team is dying because they have like 12 hours of work every day. So yeah, that's why it's also important to look at other things, for sure. And your KPIs need to be smart and not just showing 1 or 2 numbers that are yeah, too generic, basically, and not showing the whole picture.
Yeah, and it's also important to think of KPIs as a system. In order for a number to go up or down, you need some input. And if you're already thinking ahead and you're aware this number is going to go up because we're going to spend an insane amount of money in marketing, or this number is going to go up because we're going to force people to work 70 hours a week, whatever it is, you should know where the, let's say, the input is coming from for those numbers to go up. If you're just kind of clueless and just hoping for the numbers to go up, they might accidentally go up, but at the expense of something that you really don't want to. So being proactive is, to me, also very important.
Yeah, for sure. And I think maybe it's also important to, yeah, what we do usually, adding an explanation to some things that go wrong, for example. So yeah, if you have a team that is constantly failing all the KPIs in a terrible way, but you know there is only one person in there and he gets or she gets sick, goes on vacation, and just needs to do other things as well, then you have to specify it in the report. You can't just constantly like blame this team as if they do something wrong. So the numbers are not always how to say it, a source of truth. Sometimes
They
you
don't tell
also
the whole story.
exactly, yeah. So it's
Yeah.
very important to know.
Interesting. Let me flip the question, and that is like, what is a bad KPI?
Oh, that's a good question. Hmm. Um,
Anything you would consider this is definitely not a good practice, or this could lead to trouble?
yeah, I would say in terms of the processes, it's good to. I will switch to bed afterwards.
Yeah.
It's good to think about the purpose of the process. So even if the process has like 20 steps, but at the end there is one goal, it's better to have a KPI instead of 20 KPIs. Have one KPI that has that is showing them, basically whether the goal was met. So I can give you actually an example. We had a bad KPI that we removed recently. So for incident management, we had a KPI that was showing a ratio between created incidents and solved, which sounds reasonable, and it's also, I think, used in other practices. But for us, we realized at some point that our response time is great and our resolution time is great. But for some reason, this ratio, we're failing it. And then basically we realized that there are factors, since we're analyzing data per month, there were factors that were affecting this KPI in a not fair way to the people who were working on the incidents. So for example, if on the last day of the month or several last days of the month,
Yes.
there were hundreds of incidents created and then they were resolved on the first day of the next month, you fail this KPI because you didn't resolve them within the same month. So that was really not right and not fair to the teams and to people who were responsible for these KPIs. So at the end, we just removed it, and as it was more fair, like this.
Yeah, a lot of people, including me when I started, are not aware that whenever you have a ratio, ratios are very dangerous if you plan to look at them, let's say, on a periodical basis. Like, how was the ratio this month, or how was the ratio this year? Because sometimes like you accidentally grab data of a previous period and you're comparing it with events that happened in this month. That's an example that you mentioned. Also, like how many deals we closed. Do you only count the deals that started this month, or the deals that started last month and got closed this one? And what is a fair system? The truth is, most of those fair systems that tend to be accurate are not very useful because it's data that already happened way too long ago. Like, if a project started 3 months ago and it's only being closed now and you're reporting it now, then there is not too much to act upon. So it's very difficult to work with ratios over time.
Yeah, that's a good point. We learned it the hard way, but yeah, I totally agree with you.
Definitely. And okay, to be fair, well, after I asked the question, I also realized maybe it's not fair to say that there are bad KPIs, but rather that your selection process might not be optimal, like choosing the right KPIs.
Yeah, and I think it's important to be fair to the team that is behind these KPIs, because you can also put some completely unrealistic targets. Yeah, it's also bad actually. Another bad KPI. It's bad to put too high targets that
Yeah.
you will not that you will not reach, but it's extremely hard to reach. So you don't want to push people all the way there, because from the regulatory perspective, it's they want to have reasonable numbers. They don't want to have crazy high. They don't want to have 100% perfect every process. They just want to see you're in control. You know what you're doing, and you have reasonable values, but you don't need to be at the 100%. So I think that's very important to understand what's good enough.
Yeah.
It's super important because you don't need to push your teams over all the crazy limits for basically no reason that will not make anyone happy. So
Yeah. I'll never forget when during one of my first jobs, there was this insane threshold, like this insane goal. And I just approached my manager and said, look, this is what you sold on your best day ever. In order for us to meet this deadline, this threshold, it has to be the best day ever every day until the end of the year. Otherwise, you're not going to meet that target. And that really like put it to perspective.
Yeah.
So maybe sometimes like we like to talk about ratios, but sometimes changing the perspective. Another one I really like, instead of talking about conversion rates, I like to explain like you need to show this advertisement to 48 people for one of them to click.
Mm-hmm.
This staying away from ratios is also interesting.
Mm-hmm. So you mean that you have to basically have a KPI that wouldn't expect every single person to click, but
No, it's so. For example, in the world of advertisement, it's very common that they report on the clicking rate or the number of people that open this is like a 48%.
mm-hmm.
And that's a ratio, and that's kind of okay. But that completely ignores like how many people are actually looking at this and how that looks in practical terms.
Oh, okay.
So if you instead report that like it cost us so much to get one person to click, and in general we need to show this to so many people for one of them to be interested.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's also something to really think about. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but that's purely on how you present the KPI and how, especially like abstaining from ratios or looking for something else. Even maybe not per se ratios, but I also have seen companies that normalize their KPIs, and they want them always from 0 to 100.
Mm-hmm.
100 being like the best day ever and 0 being the worst day ever, and then like today we score a 58, and then they know it was a little bit better than average.
Mm-hmm.
Plenty to think about.
Yeah, yeah. You really have to consider a lot of dimensions while defining KPIs. It's not just like, oh, let's choose this number and go ahead.
But even though I really like this topic, there is something else that I really wanted to discuss with you. That is, you're involved with quite a lot of community initiatives. I know you have one of them in mind, but would you like to tell me a bit more about it?
Yes, of course, I would love to. For the last 4 years, I believe, I have participated in a super great initiative that is called Django Girls. It's maybe some of your listeners already heard about it. It's an international NGO, so non-commercial organization that is there to bring more women into IT and into programming. And basically what they do is organizing a one-day free programming workshop in Python in any city of the world. Basically everyone can do that. And basically what we are looking for are women that either never tried programming or tried it a little bit and they are not confident enough and they don't know if it's for them and so on. So basically I have been participating in these workshops as a coach back in Groningen where I studied. They have a really great event there that happens every 6 months, I believe. So I was joining as a coach to teach women programming, and now I came up with the idea to basically organize a workshop myself in Amsterdam.
Nice.
So it's called Django Girls Amsterdam. You can easily Google us if you're interested.
I will definitely put the link in the description of this video.
That would be super cool. Thank you. And basically we have great coaches, we have great sponsors, and it's available to everyone. We still have spots. So if you know someone who might be interested, that would be super nice if they join.
I have a dumb question, and that is like, you only teach the Django framework, the Python Django framework, or is it everything Python?
It's a little bit of everything. So it's only one day workshop, and it's intended for people who might not know anything about programming. And the idea is to more show people what is possible and what is basically would be a part of developer's job. So we also teach Git, which is, I would say, it's the hardest part for the teachers as well, for the coaches at the workshop, to just explain why this exists and why you have to try it. And also just basic Python. So what you can do with Python, so some basic commands, so not related to creation of the website. But the idea of the workshop is to create your first web application. So the dynamic web application, not just HTML, of course, but basically what Python can also do to make your website dynamic and show dynamic content. And so basically like a real professional website in one day. And and apart from this, some Python stuff, apart from this, some Git stuff. And we are also using a platform, Python Anywhere, to basically make your website live, so that you can also not just have it in your local machine, but also for the outside world. So to show, it's also super exciting, of course, for people who are trying it for the first time, that you can just open your phone browser and type the address and you see your own website there. So,
And it is free, right?
It is free. The workshop is free. And everything, all the tools we're using during the workshop are either open source or we're using a free version of it. So, it's definitely free.
For the listeners, it's easy. If you know any woman in your life that might be interested in something programming, just drag them there. There is really nothing to lose. Maybe they hate it, maybe they love it, maybe that's a new career. It's just a really cool initiative. And not just women, but in general, we have a huge shortage of tech people. So the more initiatives like this that we can do, the better. But now that I have you here, I'm very curious, maybe from your perspective, how has your career changed ever since you started working as a coach?
As a coach,
just teaching people.
Yeah, it's actually a very nice question. So I think women in general have, many women in general have a problem with confidence. So that's also a reason why there is not too many women in IT, because we think from the childhood we're not smart enough, we're not good enough, we better not try this. And I also had this in me, even though I broke this wall, basically went into IT, managed to do programming and other stuff. I still had this idea that I'm probably not good enough. I have nothing to give people. I have nothing to really teach. But then when I came to Django Girls for the first time as a coach, I had very, very active students every time. I'm super lucky. I have very active students who have a lot of questions. So they really I have never seen a person looking on their Instagram during the day. And for me, it's pretty crazy because it's usually a Saturday. And when people were asking questions very actively and I was answering them, and then I saw this reaction that they're actually interested and it's actually valuable to them. Or when I show them something in terminal or some Python code and they are like, oh, wow, that really helps. That's really so interesting. That is really for me, it was a huge news that I can actually be helpful for someone and I can actually add value to other people's lives. And it was the same basically when I became a manager and when I got my team, that I also felt that as a manager you have so much not power, but you can change so much in people's lives. You have so many opportunities to make it worse and at the same time to make it better. So why not to make it better? Yeah, it's impact. You're right. Yeah, not power, but impact. Yeah. So it's the same with coaching. I would say that as a manager, I also feel like I'm more a coach than a manager. So I think that is pretty cool. Maybe for your listeners who are also data analysts, data scientists, it's super cool when you share your knowledge with others and when you support them and empower them.
Yeah. You just mentioned something interesting. That is a lot of people working in tech, they feel that they don't know enough and it's always a very fun balance because on the one hand, I need to say this, if you have been working in data for more than 2 years, I don't have the exact statistic, but you're probably like already in the 10% of the data world. That's just how it is. Like, don't underestimate how many people are just getting started. So just with very few experience, you can already be very high up in the pyramid. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's an excuse for like, okay, I know everything I need to know. I can continue doing this for the rest of my life, because the best data people are also the ones that keep themselves motivated. And I'm curious about your perspective. What is the hard balance between keeping yourself motivated to become better, but also not actively harming your career by thinking that you're not good enough?
That's a very good question, and I think I'm still looking for an answer for it by myself. Yeah, but I think what is important, what we can all do as colleagues and friends to other people, to acknowledge others' achievements. So if everybody does this to each other, not just as a, empty compliment for no reason, but if a person did something great for you, that you really acknowledge it. And yeah, I think if that happens, that already helps a lot to believe in yourself. And the motivation, I think it's with the tech people. I feel like the motivation is always there. Like, I've never met a tech person who would be like, I know everything. So yeah, I would say the keeping motivation is more important than keeping this not the motivation, believing in yourself, kind of growing your confidence. And yeah.
Okay, and then transitioning to what probably is going to be the last topic of this podcast is, you have been through that transition of like transitioning into data. You're helping people do it at, like, well, of course, your company, but also at a bigger scale with these Django workshops that you do, Django Girls. Do you have any advice for the people listening that are either transitioning to a data role, or maybe even inside of data roles? Because I know people that are an analyst but they want to be a data scientist, or a data scientist and they want to be a data engineer, or whatever it is. Like, what are your tips?
Yeah, I definitely have a tip. So when I was switching to from journalist to data analyst, apart from my master's, it was clearly not enough, the knowledge that I got there. So I needed more technical knowledge. And what I did was taking a lot of online courses, like really a lot. But the thing is that they were very theoretical, or when they were practical, there was usually just a code in there already on a specific topic, and I just needed to update a couple of lines. And I don't believe this is this is what basically gives you the confidence in programming or data analysis. I think what you really need, like when I felt like I started being confident and I knew what I was doing, was when I started getting my own projects and I started working on something from scratch. So I think this is super important. Like, even if you take 100 courses, it's really cool. Like, you get the knowledge, you learn the approach, but you don't use it with your own hands for your specific use case. And I think it's very cool to find a project that you're really interested in. So some topic, whether you are, I don't know, from medicine or from history studies, that you really take something that you care about and you build just a project for yourself. And basically it would give you experience and confidence, and you would learn something by doing. So I think that's super important.
That's interesting. I've never really fully agree with a lot of people. I know most of the data world and IT world would say like, oh, just don't worry about tutorials, just get started, get programming. I personally learn a lot from seeing like really good code examples. Like, I love those tutorials where like you get most of the code done and you need to fill in the gaps. But I have to fully agree with you. It's very important that the moment you learn something, you apply it as soon as possible with something. Me personally, I have my own, let's call it very amateuristic data platform. And every time I learn something, I just try to expand it with that. And right now it's like very Frankensteinian, and it has all sorts of crazy tennis data.
Tennis?
Yes.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, but whenever I learn something interesting and I want to apply it, I do it, or whenever there is an interesting framework, I try to see if it works, and it's not something, but I would definitely recommend all of you that are learning, build your own project, and hopefully one that you can stick with and that you can use it to try a lot of things. And if I would be into data science, I would try to like apply all sorts of models to it, but I just have it there, and every now and then I try new libraries on it.
But that's pretty cool. Which kind of analysis do you do on attendance data?
The most important one is it's real data. It's from my own tennis club.
Oh.
The most important is court usage. There is always this thing of how many club members is too many or too few. So you need to segment people into like very active users, not too active. And then a club is healthy when they have a really good pyramid of non-active people to, well, pay their membership and like keep the club financially healthy. A good number of active players that keep the courts occupied and that they bring life to the club. But you cannot have too many because then people start complaining that they can never play and they go somewhere else. So just keeping that balance is super important. I really like the whole membership stuff. But I also have some other data on like sports data, of like point by point data of other matches, sometimes my own, and that's always a different game. Those data sets tend to be much, much larger.
Cool. I think it's actually a cool example of like a personal project that matters to you. It's literally about your games as well. So yeah, sounds very nice.
That's true. But also I have to say the very first data project that I felt proud of is I used to have a long list of books that I wanted to order, but I didn't have that much money, so I just always waited until they were on discounts. And so I built a scraper that would look for the price of those books in different sites, and it would send me an email every time that there was like a certain price. And I said like, I'm only going to buy this if I find it for 60% off or 40% off. Or if I really wanted it, I will set it to 20. And the whole process of sending me an email back was very, very awkward and very bad. And it's probably embarrassing if I look at it, but I learned quite a lot from that.
Nice. Oh, but it also sounds like a very practical thing to do.
Oh, but then I hear from some of my colleagues like, oh yeah, I also build my own project that scrapes like stock market data and it helps me invest, or looks at houses and helps me pick a house first. And
Wow.
I'm like, why didn't I think of a project that instead of spending money in books, like, I don't know, makes me rich?
Yeah, especially with the financial markets. Yeah, you can do a lot there for sure. But I like the idea with the books. I was just discussing with my friends recently the same thing, but with the groceries. But it must be like a really huge project then.
Ooh, that sounds like
Yeah.
a startup idea even.
Yeah.
Good. Maybe to wrap up this episode, maybe somebody listening to this thought like, oh, Django Girls is an interesting thing. Maybe not only join as a participant, but join as a coach. What is your invitation, your call to action to maybe more experienced Python people that might want to help somehow?
Yeah, absolutely. This is also a great idea that you raised. Actually, we are also open for coaches. It's, of course, not paid, so it's on a volunteer basis. So on our website, there is also an application form for coaches, and we're super happy if you decide to apply. If you know Python, that's definitely all you need to know, because when I started being a coach, I knew Python, but I did not know Django. But just to prepare for the workshop, I went through some Django documentation, through the tutorial itself, and I managed to teach people already on the first workshop that I joined. So yeah, if you just know Python but don't know Django, that's no worries. You can still help us. And yeah, we're super happy to have enthusiastic people who want to support the idea of having more women in IT.
Oh, and I can imagine also companies that want to donate or provide their
Absolutely.
space and organize this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it's also, we already have a location for this workshop. but we are open for more sponsors, and it's also not the last workshop we're organizing, hopefully. So we are allowed to organize it every 6 months, not more often than that. But in 6 months we will already need sponsors again. So if you're thinking about it already, you can also contact us for that.
Awesome. Thank you very much. It's been a really fun episode.
Thank you too. Thanks for inviting.